The event over the past have highlighted a need for police reform in our country, in our community. Advocates, victims, and their families are crying out for accountability, transparency, and changes to improve police policies and build mutual trust and respect between the police and the community and police. I've always said that the two must be on the same page, working together in the interest of our city as a whole. Last year, on June the 10th, if you can recall, we met in this same room the day after George Floyd's funeral, and I, along with council members, signed Executive Order 1-67 on the use of deadly force in the Houston Police Department, banning excessive use of force, banning chokeholds, requiring that officers have a duty to intervene, restricting when officers can shoot at moving vehicles, call for a use of force continuum, requires officers, when possible, to give verbal warnings before using deadly force, and requires comprehensive use of reporting. I signed that, and many of the members of City Council joined with me in signing that on June the 10th. I will say that many of these things that we put in place through the executive order, those things are still being debated in Austin at the Capitol, or being debated up in D.C. But those things are in effect already in the city of Houston. The task force also indicated that while these measures represented positive steps in the right direction, the department should add the following, and that is a ban on no-knock warrants for non-violent offenses. The existing executive order still allows for no-knock warrants as long as the warrant has been approved in writing by the HPD Chief of Police or his designee, and the warrant has been signed by a district court judge. Today, we are banning no-knock warrants for violent offenses, which is the recommendation of the task force. On June, and I do want to acknowledge also at the outset this task force that was headed by Larry Payne. You're going to be hearing me mention his name several along with the members of the task force, the 45 members. So Larry, at the very beginning, I want to acknowledge and thank you for your incredible leadership. And I might also add that prior to this press conference on last night, Larry Payne convened, I think it was about 25 or 27 members of the task force, where I went over the recommendations of the things, the steps we are taking today with that task force, and had a very enlightening conversation with them. On June 24, I then appointed the Mayor's Task Force on Policing Reform, chaired by Larry Payne, and asked members to study Houston Police Department policies and procedures. And last September, shortly thereafter, I assembled the 45-member task force chaired by Larry. The task force presented 104 recommendations, and as I said then and since then, I agreed with the overwhelming number of those recommendations. Over the past several months, we have been deliberate and methodical in our approach, which required time, additional study, identifying individuals to hire or appoint to key positions called for in the reforms. And quite frankly, the lack of funding affected the implementation and execution of some of the key recommendations. Today, I am going to announce how we are moving forward to implement additional reforms called for by the task force, and some of the major proposals including in the task force recommendation. In a brief summary, we are changing the Houston Police Department's policy on body-worn cameras. I'm announcing the hiring of a Deputy Inspector General of the new Office of Policing Reform and Accountability, restructuring of the Independent Police Oversight Board to include appointing a new chair, changing how members of the public can file complaints and access information on a newly designed website with 5 data dashboards, regarding police transparency, and a roughly $25 million investment in crisis intervention over 3 years. The task force recommended that we integrate respectful, consistent, and meaningful community engagement and input into existing work practices, including recruiting, training, patrolling, and promoting. We are expanding community engagement into cadet training, as well as post-training in that first year. We will continue to partner with Sam Houston State University, but we will broaden our reach to include a partnership with Texas Southern University, and I've had the privilege of talking to President Hewlett already at Texas Southern, and he has graciously agreed to partner with us, and with Prairie View A&M Ruth J. Simmons Center for Race and Justice to conduct community surveys, use technology to obtain real-time feedback, ask for community input on recruiting materials, and we will publish the findings. All of these recommendations come from the task force. We are already utilizing a video circulating using officers, for example, in sororities and fraternities in order to encourage others to join the Houston Police Force. In the past, in terms of the application process, we have asked for people's credit scoring. We will no longer be asking for credit scores anymore. And we will continue to hold and expand our PIP meetings. With regards to independent oversight, the task force recommended that we overhaul the current independent police officer board to support a full-time paid administrative and investigative staff accompanied by a diverse civilian board to hold HPD accountable to a higher standard. Today, I am signing an executive order restructuring the board and appointing Steve Ives, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the YMCA of Greater Houston, to serve as the Independent Police Oversight Chair. Steve and I have had several conversations over the last several weeks about his role in serving in this capacity, and the conversations have been very constructive and productive. And quite frankly, Steve has said it not one time but several times, Mayor, this is a defining moment in our city, and I am here and ready to serve. And so I want to thank Steve Ives, and you'll be hearing from him shortly. Today, I am appointing a Deputy Inspector General also of the new Office of Police Reform and Accountability. Krista Okorva is a Harris County Chief Prosecutor currently, overseeing felony cases. In that position, she led and supervised investigations and prosecutions and tried numerous jury trials. She also served as a prosecutor in the Major Narcotics Criminal Division and as a diversion program prosecutor. She is a graduate of the University of Texas, undergrad, and a graduate of Thurgood Marshall School of Law of Texas Southern University. Crystal will have a limited staff to investigate complaints both internally and externally, and to report to the Police Oversight Board, as well as to the Chief of Police. Additionally, community members will be able, and let me pause there, because I want to thank Ms. Okorva, Crystal, for also agreeing to serve, and where is she? Right there, for also agreeing, you'll be hearing from her shortly, for agreeing to serve. And she's had many conversations with my staff, and I've had a chance to visit with her as well, and took time to woo her away. But we are very appreciative of the fact that she viewed this as a transformational moment as well, and has agreed to serve in a full-time capacity. In addition, community members will now be able to submit complaints online, and they can also submit complaints to community groups like the NAACP, LULAC, the Anti-Defamation League, the Islamic Society of Greater Houston, the Mayor's Office with People with Disabilities, the Mayor's LGBTQ Task Force. They certainly, and others, can accept complaints and then forward them on to the office. The complaint form will be in multiple languages and accessible, and quarterly reports, as asked for by the task force, recommended by the task force, will also be provided. And so I'm very